Hello and welcome back to the channel. On today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you how to draft a simple waist snatch tube bustier blouse. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button. Let's dive right into today's video. So first, I've gone ahead to mark out all my basic measurements, which includes my shoulder to bust, shoulder to underbust, shoulder to waistline, and the top length. So now for my top length, I added 5 inches extra to get that from my waistline. So my total length is 22. You can go ahead and use 22 inches if you're on a shorter side, but if you're much taller, 24 to 26 inches will be okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and mark my shoulder divided by 2. So for this pattern, I won't be adding ½ inch for the sleeve because this is actually a tube bustier dress. So my shoulder divided by 2 will give me 7 inches and I'll go down by 1 inch. Now I'm going to connect from that point to my shoulder this way. After I'm done connecting, I'll go ahead to mark my chest line, and to get your chest line is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. Now I'm going to go ahead to measure what I have there and mark it here just to get a straight line for my chest line. So after I'm done ruling out the line, I'll place and connect from my shoulder down to my chest line. Now I'm going to divide my chest line into 2, fold my tape, and I'll be marking at that point. So now I'll come out by ½ inch, mark my bust circumference divided by 4 at this point, and I'm going to connect from my bust line to my armhole, and I'm going to go ahead to use my pencil to draw it out and use my marker to make it more visible for you to see. So after I'm done doing this, now I'll be using a basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches. So for this pattern, the neckline is not really inclusive, but I went ahead to mark it for those that are going to use this as a yoke also. Now go ahead to reconnect your pattern at the upper part. Now I'm going to be marking my dart, and to mark my dart, I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. Now my nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches. After marking that at the bust, under bust, waistline, and top length, I'm going to go ahead and place my ruler, and I'm going to connect, drawing a straight line at those points. Now I'll be marking 1 inch dart for my dart intake at the under bust, waistline, and top length. So for a plus size, go ahead and use 1.5 inches to do that. Now I'll place my ruler and I'm going to be drawing a straight line. So for a beginner, it is easier for a beginner to use a straight dart or Y sewing. So after I'm done connecting, I'm going to place my French curve, and I'm going to connect from the bust down to the under bust, and I will repeat the same process at the other side. So now this is what I have. The next step we'll be taking is to go ahead and divide what we have at the shoulder into 2. Now I'm going to place my tape, fold into 2, and I'm going to go ahead to mark. Now this will serve as a guide for when I'm marking out my dart at the upper part of my chest line. So I'll connect from my chest line down to the shoulder point, and after I'm done doing that, I will be going up by 1.5 inches. You can go ahead and use 2 inches if you don't want your cleavage to be revealed. Now I'll make a line at this point, which will be serving as a guide. Next step is to go ahead and mark your dart intake. I will be marking one at each point. So for a plus size, you can go ahead and use 1.5 or more inches at the upper part of your bust. After I'm done connecting, I'm going to go ahead and use my marker, and I'm going to connect. Now I'll be using my chest line as my reference point, and I'm going to connect from there. That is the 1.5 inches I came up from the chest line down to my chest line. Now I'll take that straight. So the 2 inches that intake we took out at the upper part, will be replacing it at the armhole. So if you took out more than 2 inches, go ahead to replace it. Now I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace, and mark my sewing allowance, and I'll go ahead to connect. Mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll go ahead to mark, and I'll measure the dart intake, and I'll go ahead and replace it also and mark my sewing allowance. For the waistline, you're not going to use your actual waistline, so whatever you have, you're going to minus 3 inches from it, and then go ahead to divide it by 4, mark, measure the dart intake, and you're going to mark your sewing allowance. So in case your waist is 28, you're going to minus 3 inches, making it 25. Go ahead to divide by 4 and mark. At the hip, I'll be marking my hip circumference divided by 4. After marking my hip circumference divided by 4, you're going to go ahead to measure the dart intake at that point, and after measuring it, you're going to add your sewing allowance. So after this, the next step I'm going to take is to go ahead to connect from the under bust to the bust line and down to the waistline, and after doing that, I'm going to connect to my top length. So I'm just going to do a freehand sketch with that. If you have a French curve, go ahead to use that. I have a French curve, but at this point I'm just using a freehand sketch. So now I'm going to rule out my top length so that you get confused where my top is ending. So after that, this is what I have. Now we're going to draw out the shape we have on the lower part. So I'm going to go up by 2 inches. So this is not a standard. You can go up by 1.5, 2 inches, or 2.5, depending on the design that you are working with. So after doing that, I'm going to go ahead to connect from that point down to the other side of my pattern. So I'm going to use my pencil to trace out to make sure I have what I desire, and I'll blend in my darts this way. So after doing that, I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker, and I'm going to outline it to make my pattern more visible for you to see. So I've gone ahead to use my marker to mark out, and this is what I have. So sorry, my voice is a little cracky with this video. So without much wasting time, we'll go ahead and blend the upper part of this pattern. So this is what I have, and I'm going to go ahead to cut this out. So now at the other side of the pattern, you can divide to slash it into 2. So now at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet also subscribed to my main YouTube channel, which is Maki's Closet, please go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There you'll be getting sewing and drafting tutorials at the same time. So now I'll go ahead and slash the second part or pattern into 2. So I'll divide it into 2 equal parts down to the bust line, and I'll connect it to my armhole area, or close to the armhole area. Now I'll use my marker to outline that. So sorry that I didn't know that the sunlight here was too much, and I was recording and I didn't notice that. So now we have 3 patterns for that. So now we are moving over to the back pattern. Just like we marked out the back pattern, we have the same at the back, and I have gone ahead to also mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2 to draw our dart. Now I'm going to place my tape, and I'm going to mark my shoulder to bust line plus 1 inch. This is a guideline to mark out your dart. Now I'll be marking ½ inch at both sides, and I'll connect it upwards down to that my shoulder to bust line plus 1 inch, and I'll also connect to the other side. Now from that point, I'll connect to the lower down of this back pattern, and I'll connect to the other side also. So now after I'm done connecting, I'm going to go ahead to use my marker to outline it to make this pattern more visible for you to see. And after I'm done connecting it, this is what I have. Now the next step we're going to take from here is to go ahead to insert our measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, add my sewing allowance since there's no dart, mark the waistline I used for the front, then measure the dart intake, replace it, and after that I'll add my sewing allowance. Here I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4, add my sewing allowance. Now I'll place my ruler and I'll connect to the under bust, then place my French curve, and I'll connect from the under bust down to the waistline this way. So after I'm done connecting, I'm going to go ahead to use my marker to outline to make it more visible. So I'm going to go up at the waistline, but before doing that, I'm going to come down by ½ inch at the chest line and I'm going to connect. So this is my pattern at this point, and I'll be marking 1.5 or 1.5 inches at this point also. So you can use 2 inches to create your lacing bar area. Now I'm going to connect and draw a straight line. So this is the lacing bar. For this bustier pattern, we're actually lacing it up at the back to create the snatched waist effect that we have. Now I'll be going up by 2 inches just like we did at the front. So this is the back pattern, and I'll be going up by 1 because the back pattern is usually higher than the front pattern, and I'll go ahead to connect. So this is what I have, and I'll label it as 1 and 2, and after that I'm going to go ahead to cut out my pattern. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to leave your comments at the comment section, and see you in our next video. So this is what I have after drafting.